Welcome everyone to our January Innovation Forum meeting, the first of 2025. And we are extremely excited to be joined by Arthi Sairaman. Arthi is a leading expert when it comes to smart manufacturing and workforce transformation. And she's going to be sharing some insights and some tailored, actionable solutions for small and mid-sized manufacturers to assess readiness and upskilling your teams. Without any further ado, I'll hand it over to Arthi to dive into the content.
So happy New Year, everyone. Welcome back as we kick off 2025. Kurt, Norman, I want to thank you for inviting me to speak to the camp's members through this innovation forum. Quickly introducing myself. I'm Arthi Sairaman, and I work with MTAB USA. My background is in Industry 4.0, smart manufacturing, robotics, autonomous vehicles, and smart manufacturing products. So prior to my current role, I led a firm that built robots, autonomous vehicles, and smart factory products specifically for manufacturers in the space of automotive, aerospace, medical, high-value engineering. And we got to solve some interesting productivity, quality problems, incorporating digital technologies and Industry 4.0. Now, quick statistics about the company that I previously led, about 150 plus products in 30 plus countries. We had over 450,000 installations that included hardware, software, learnware, and 100,000 users trained on the product. And most importantly, that we are very proud of is more than 10 million students who actually got to train in the next generation technology to go and serve in the workforce. Now, as we did this service of providing Industry 4.0 solutions to our clients, we also saw a huge amount of self-transformation. And I'm hoping that today, through the course of the conversation, I will get to share with you some of those stories and the ideas that we implemented, which worked out successfully. Before we kick off anything else, I actually wanted to share this cute video that I came across from one of my fellow LinkedIn followers. Whether it's AI, Industry 4.0, manufacturing technology, this is pretty appropriate in terms of how we think about implementing the technology and trying to get the value itself. The conversation that I'm hoping to have with all of you today is going to be one where it is important for manufacturers, irrespective of size, to understand what your current state is as compared to the industry. How do you use this information about the current state to understand the strategy that you want to implement and the roadmap that you can prioritize? And more importantly, across the operating time horizon, whether it is 3 to 6 months, 1 to 2 years, or 3 to 5 years, capturing the value in various stages. Now, most of you have heard Industry 4.0 in multiple forums, multiple conversations, and I will look at it from the perspective of what's on top of mind for many of the manufacturers. How do we actually use digital in our everyday life and extending it into the industry? And using those concepts towards the next few slides that we have. If you're a small manufacturer or mid-scale manufacturer, one of the top questions that I see in the US as well as outside is around a fear of missing out on the trend. Am I missing an important trend? What are the investments should I be consider making in my organization? And with an aging workforce and a talent funnel which is not populating itself quickly enough, how do I attract new talent? How do I upskill and reskill my workforce? So these are some of the top questions on most of the manufacturers around the world. But if you're a small manufacturer, you also are thinking about what is the future of your business and the exit strategy. Do I want to be acquired? How do I raise capital to grow? And most importantly, how do I plan succession so that I can hand off a well-defined manufacturing process to the next generation to carry on the legacy? So with these questions in mind, let's set the stage and make sure that all of us are on the same page. I'm going to pick a couple of examples to talk about how we are using connectivity and digital technology in our everyday life, extend it into manufacturing, and then dive into the rest of the conversation. We are all consumers of e-commerce sites, whether it's Amazon, Walmart, or a whole number of e-commerce sites. We want to buy something, we know exactly what we're looking for online. We see whether it's available in the configuration that we want. And when we place the order, we know exactly when it's going to be delivered to us. And in the case of Amazon, you know when the truck is 3 doors from the house so that you can make sure you pick up your package before somebody else does. Then you have today, if you're coming into the office, you probably looked at the traffic map to figure out when you should be leaving. So you're using traffic information that's coming in through Google. And if you're using the tollway, your car has this RFID tag, which is automatically being recognized by the toll gateway and deducts the toll that you need. Some simple ways in which the connectivity is being used in our everyday life. Now imagine what's happening in manufacturing, right? In manufacturing, you have these devices which already have several different sensors that are collecting information about what's happening on the machine, what is the productivity, is there a potential issue that is coming up, and it's capable of communicating that information. Now, in the case of smart energy grids, another example, and infrastructure, these infrastructure are also connected, talking to a central tower, letting them know what is the status, how are they producing energy, and if there's a potential issue which requires a service technician to come in and address it before things go down. In all of these cases, what's happening is that data is being collected, stored somewhere, cloud or otherwise. A certain amount of analytics is being done, and then it is shared to us as insights that we can use to make decisions. When do you want to leave home? When is your package arriving? Couple of examples from our everyday life. Now, what does that mean for the manufacturing? What it means is that every leader, engineer, staff, and a technician is going to need some key digital skills to start working with the processes and technology that you're going to find in the manufacturing field. Now, Industry 4.0 is probably one of the most used term in the market at the moment, and you must have heard it from the perspective of robotics, IIoT, digital twin, artificial intelligence, machine learning, digitalization, smart factory, etc. Now, all of these are components of this Industry 4.0 concept and set of principles. There is a common thread that actually is connecting all of this, and that is the digital thread that runs across the entire operation, right? So all the way from the time that you are conceptualizing the product that you're manufacturing to how exactly you're going to be procuring it, manufacturing it, getting it into the hands of the customer, servicing it, and now more importantly with circular economy, how do you recycle or reclaim the product through the supply chain so that it's just not any waste dump. So today, I am going to be talking to you from the perspective of a framework called Smart Industry Readiness Index. It comes out of an international organization that is primarily focusing on how to help manufacturers with the Industry 4.0 transformation. And we're going to be looking at a framework, and we're going to look at a particular example. We're going to have a manufacturing company, and what would they do with an assessment and the results that come out of it to define a strategy and go through the execution. So our company is going to be ABC Manufacturing, and we're going to be looking at a small company, but the principles that I'm going to be talking about are applicable to small, mid-scale, as well as large firms. So our company is owner-led, been in business for 20 plus years, makes metal parts for aerospace. So there's this CNC and a whole bunch of other technology which is going in. Has about 50 employees, average tenure about 12 plus years, generating a revenue of about $10 million, and has one factory location in the state of Washington. Our owner has some concerns in their mind right now, which is related to deliveries, which are slipping. There has been a couple of instances where poor quality has slipped through into the customer hands, and that has raised scrutiny on their process. There is the issue of rising costs and how to manage the margins that the business has. And of course, being in aerospace, they are seeing increased compliance requirements. So how do you capture that and communicate to the customer? Now, with this framework, the example of the company, let's look at what Smart Industry Readiness Index is itself. So there are 3 building blocks, 8 pillars, and 16 dimensions that looks at the organization holistically in order to give you a picture of what your current state is. Let's look at the first pillar. The first building block is process, and manufacturing has always depended on good processes to make sure your raw materials are getting converted into finished goods that meet customer requirements. Now, from that perspective, you have this designing, the planning of the product, acquiring the raw materials, actual production, sales and distribution of the product, and supporting the customer itself. A big part of it, the operations pillar, is around the processes inside the business, which is what is called vertical integration. And then you are talking to the suppliers of raw materials and your customers to figure out how exactly you're going to meet their expectation, which is horizontal integration. And the product life cycle, when in most manufacturers, they think about it from the design side of things, but this is from the concept to engineering it, procuring the materials, manufacturing it, distributing it to the customers, supporting the customers, and then now end of life reclamation of the product itself. The next is the technology pillar, which consists of automation, connectivity, and intelligence. Now, having run a firm in automation and robotics for about 14 years, when I think about automation, automatically my mind goes to shop floor automation, robots, conveyor belts, etc. But here we're actually talking about how we do process automation, not only at the shop floor, but also in your enterprise, how the different processes work within the enterprise, as well as the facilities where this conversion of raw materials to finished goods is taking place. Connectivity is the concept of how data is getting transferred, whether it is between the equipment through common protocols or between the enterprise processes using various systems and within the facilities using the right control mechanisms such as the building information management systems, etc. Intelligence is all about how you use the data that you're collecting, mining, and applying the logic and algorithms to get the insight you need to make decision making. Right. Next on is your organization itself, and a big portion of it is dependent on people and getting people ready to adopt the technology, the change management that you're looking to implement. This is not only at the workforce level, but also at staff and leadership level to make sure they are ready for Industry 4.0 and have the right strategy to drive it across the organization in a sustainable manner. This is a quick look at a framework of SIRI. Once we have the current state using this framework we just looked at, you also need to look at the cost profile of your firm itself. There are going to be indicators that your cost is built into certain areas, and you need to be able to figure out better efficiencies around it. The industry and your operations have certain key indicators which are going to be used as part of this framework and discussion to find out what are the right prioritized activities to be done. And of course, you also need to look at who are the best in class in your industry. So in our case, in ABC manufacturing, with the parts being manufactured, we consider is general manufacturing industry, and there are best in class practices that need to be adopted so that you can move in that right direction. We have a basic understanding of what now is SIRI, which is a Smart Industry Readiness Index from an Industry 4.0 maturity perspective. We're now going to look at how this particular framework would get adopted or assessed across ABC manufacturing, right? I am a certified assessor, and I have taken ABC manufacturing by conversing with the experts within the company, by talking to the management team, by seeing what are the documents and the processes that they have, and have an assessment report for them. The numbers that you see on the top, 0 through 5, is called bands, and it is an indication of how the processes are integrated or automated across those different pillars that we are looking at. There are 16 dimensions, and these 16 dimensions give you a holistic picture of this company. So this report, what it tells me about ABC manufacturing is that in this company, there are SOPs, standard operating procedures, in the vertical and horizontal integration, as well as in the integrated product lifecycle. However, they are fairly informally managed. meaning that the processes are probably handled manually. Data is most likely maintained loosely in a system or in Excel spreadsheet. The integrated product life cycle is in a better banding, which indicates that this owner might have greater interest in designing a product and manufacturing engineering, so that's why it's on a higher band. There's some level of automation on the floor, maybe light automation to handle some of the repetitive processes at the shop floor and the enterprise automation, but again, very loosely so. You're not seeing anything on the facility level. In terms of machines, quite possibly with 20 plus years, the equipment which is there on the shop floor as a siloed equipment, information is sitting there, supervisor are probably collecting it on paper and or Excel spreadsheet and communicating with the other staff members and management. Same thing from enterprise perspective, the connectivity is light. Data resides in databases because it is flowing through manual entries that are made. Your facility, you're collecting certain information by virtue of certain meters, maybe the usage of electricity, water, steam, and pneumatics, etc. You can see that intelligence is missing, meaning that manufacturing, the company may have a lot of information, but nothing is being analyzed to drive certain decisions or changes within the organization. With many small manufacturers, I typically find that they do care for their employees a lot and have a pretty good HR team that takes care of the training and development of the people, onboarding of new employees, etc. And they have, by virtue of the fact that we are in the internet age, good productivity tools, common repository of data. People come together when there's a problem in order to address it as needed. Now, what is lacking is that the owner is perhaps working in the business instead of on the business. From a strategy perspective, it is more about opportunistic rather than a structured way of approaching it. This is how I, as an assessor, would be looking at the report and look at opportunities to help the small business. Now, the cost profile for ABC manufacturing indicates that the raw materials, labor, and the sales and general administrative expenses make up almost 80% of this company's expense. This is where a bulk of their cost is coming from. And given that we have had what the owner has as problem areas in their mind, he wants to look at how to improve productivity. So inventory and workforce efficiency is a key area of his interest from a KPI perspective. And because we have had so many delays, he's looking at what kind of planning and scheduling flexibility and workforce flexibility can he introduce within the business to better address those concerns. And the fact that we've had a couple of product quality issues indicates that there may be an opportunity to tighten up the processes as well. With this information, we're going to look at what ABC manufacturing looks like against best in class. The assessment report, when finally being delivered to management, is going to have this comparative statement, which allows them to see how they are performing against best in class. And the best in class are the green connected dots that you see towards the right-hand side of the screen. And the low performing bottom 10% is the one that you're seeing as red dots on the left-hand side of the screen. And in the middle are these purple dots that are the broad middle, which is where 80% of the general manufacturing sector is playing in. When you overlay what we have just assessed at ABC manufacturing against this report, we can see that there are lots of opportunities to make improvements. Now, there is an operational time horizon for any initiative that we take, right? So it could be 3 to 6 months, 1 to 2 years, or 3 to 5 years, which is where most of the enterprises and large companies are playing. But for ABC manufacturing, we are looking at a 1 to 2 year period and applying the methodology, which includes a degree of relevance for your cost, for your KPIs, how they are against the best in class manufacturing, and allows you to bubble up the most important aspects. Now, if I was just looking at this particular chart without necessarily applying these principles, my immediate wish would be to, I need to do something about shop floor automation. That's where the problem is. I need to get some intelligence out of that. And I probably am not going to be looking at the other dimensions. And that's typical because you are a domain expert and you want to look at the area where you have the most comfort within which you can answer questions easily. And this is the case for many manufacturing companies and not a unique problem. So looking at it, we see that the bubbled up opportunities are actually in process vertical integration. So how to integrate the operations within the organization, how to gather intelligence from your shop floor and intelligence and enterprise in order to address the questions of efficiency and flexibility that you need in your scheduling as well as workforce. And then, of course, how as a leader can you develop certain competencies in Industry 4.0 and strategies so that you can guide your entire organization again. Now, what does that mean in terms of the moves you can make, right? So we know that process is high up there in that chain. And quite likely, if you're a 20-plus-year-old organization, you have an ERP and MES system, which is at least 10 years old and could be refreshed to best take advantage of some of the new items which are there in the solutions. And someone like Coastal Consulting is well positioned to give you that guidance. Now, you want shop floor intelligence and enterprise intelligence. For that purpose, you again have members in this CAMPS community that can help you, such as the Melgo. Now let's look at another one, which is the digital infrastructure. Overall, if you ask anybody in the field, the digital infrastructure is one of the weakest criteria in a manufacturing sector right now. And over the holidays, I actually had the opportunity to talk to one of the insurance companies, a commercial insurance company, and I asked them what concerns them from a manufacturer right now. They said cybersecurity is the highest priority that they see for the manufacturing sector. This is because the number of ransomware attacks that they've actually seen on mid-scale and small manufacturing businesses has risen significantly, and the numbers that I saw was almost 50-50, equal between mid and small. So if you have an IT team in-house, use them in order to strengthen up the security of your digital infrastructure. And if you do not, then outsource it to bring in an IT firm to build out a strong infrastructure from a cybersecurity and digital infrastructure. And third part of it, which comes back from the original question from what's on top of mind for manufacturers, has been around workforce development, right? You got this concern that you have a workforce which is aging and is going to be leaving, and you do not have enough of a funnel to come in and take over that. What does that mean? One of the first observations that I've had with respect to job descriptions that I see from many manufacturers, especially small and mid-scale manufacturers, is that it has not changed much in the last 20 years. Whereas the world in which we are living, in terms of the digital tools and digital technologies, it has changed significantly. And we should definitely consider updating our job descriptions and the type of skills that we are looking from the workforce. The second aspect of it is that businesses should not think that they need to go at it alone in order to figure out what Industry 4.0 means for them. You've got this fantastic community like the camps and Impact Washington, which actually allows you to have advisors, consultants, and even this hiring process that just talked about to find the right employees with the right experience to come and help you with the implementation of that strategy. And I will, in the next few slides, I will give you a couple of examples of how that job description change looks like as well. So given that infrastructure and workforce are so critical for small and mid-scale businesses, I'm going to dig a little deeper into those two areas. So we talked about redefining job descriptions. Today, the job descriptions that are being put out for manufacturing, many times they actually miss the digital skills that are going to be needed for this employee to make the organization successful as well as be successful themselves. And we look at one of the JDs, a simple shop floor JD from that perspective. The second thing that we see is data literacy. What I mean about that is, let's look at the 80s and 90s, right? When there was this massive shift from manual manufacturing to going into CNC and adopting some level of automation in machining. there was this huge sweep of learning CNC technology and CNC programming of machines, and that became a synonymous so much that it is a basic that we require from any kind of CNC operator. But when we look at the next generation of operators on the shop floor or operators in any factory, you're also going to see that they are going to be interacting with a level of data that's coming from sensors, charts that they're going to be leading, and this is going to be a fundamental requirement in terms of ability, the skill that is needed. The third aspect of it is the workforce that we talked about, aging as well as the new workforce that we're talking about. We need to think about how do we capture the experiential knowledge that resides within your experienced operators, supervisors, and workers. How do we allow them to build their legacy, which allows them to capture the experience in digitized format that can now then be used for the new generation to train on. And looking at the new generation, if you have kids, nephews, nieces, you probably see that the way they learn is completely different from how you learned, probably how I've learned. You can no longer expect to put a 100-page binder in front of a new employee who is probably in their 20s and expect them to learn that way. These are folks who are extremely comfortable with working with mobile tools, AR, VR, with using YouTube and videos to learn, using remote assist to solve problems, etc. And their expectation is that when they come into a manufacturing workplace, they get to see some of these tools in operation. So digitizing your work instructions, how you offer internal support for your employees, and of course, the training that you offer to your employees for onboarding in various functions within your organization. And there are a lot of tools, inexpensive tools, which actually allow you to do all of this. From a job description, and we'll look at it for a simple CNC operator from Industry 3.0 to an Industry 4.0 perspective. The first line remains the same, familiarity with CNC programming, operation, cutting parameters, etc. But the next thing becomes interesting. Now, instead of this operator receiving a new part which needs to be manufactured, they would not go directly to the machine and try to do the prove out. What they would do is they would take this drawing, enter it into a CAM software, set up as a digital twin their machine with the tools and the measures that they're going to be taking and do the prove out in a digital environment before taking it onto the machine as an electronic transfer of program. This not only makes it faster from a time to market perspective for the part, but also make sure that you're reducing the cost in terms of the resources as well as the people, the person time in order to get this validation done. Next on the list is most of the new machines which are coming into the market are IoT ready machines. And there's a lot of capability within the machine to be able to support an operator to identify what's going on in the machine, to give you automatic information about uptime, downtime, productivity, aspects of predictive maintenance, including nudging the operator to be able to do the predictive maintenance. And because these are connected machines, now the operator needs to know that it's not just about switching on the machine to power it up, energized to work, but also know whether it's connected to the network and what are some of the basic security procedures that they need to know to make sure their machine is connected to the network. And similarly, starting to work on the machine is not just about powering up the machine. There's all those aspect of access, right? So there's identity management to make sure that the right person is accessing the machine and you are not doing anything to potentially change configuration over there. And other people are not having access to important information, which is business property. Building workforce capability is never a short-term affair, right? You are looking at a 5-year period, and there is a positive thing about Industry 4.0 that it is influencing multiple roles and multiple industries. What that does is that it allows transferable skills across industries as well as across roles. And that is a good thing because that is creating that funnel that you need as you go and improve the business processes within various manufacturing organizations. So One of the things that we did well from our organization perspective was that we trained our people really well. And when I at the company, I had quite a few of my employees actually go on and work with some of the bigger organizations because the training that we offered them within our company made them extremely valuable to the larger organizations that they went in. Another example that I actually wanted to give you from this digitization perspective is actually an example from our supervisor. So this was a gentleman with 35 plus years of experience building out machines and robots. And he was fantastic at getting about 1 micron tolerance, stacked up tolerance on any equipment. So how do we capture that knowledge? What we did was we actually put this supervisor with apprentices. We had apprentices come through our organization to learn skills and be able to go on and work in other companies. So we put them together, and one of the requirements for the apprentice was to create assets in video documenting in terms of recordings, etc., so that we can capture how exactly this supervisor was able to achieve the tolerance. What happened here was that the supervisor was building the legacy that he wanted to transfer. He was training these apprentices as a mentor, and more importantly, he was able to create this knowledge of how he gets certain things done, which we could then use to train other employees. So the next thing is from an infrastructure perspective, we looked at cybersecurity, and I said cybersecurity is pretty critical across all of the businesses, whether you are in manufacturing, retail, or any business, because of the concerns that are coming up. Most importantly, you have your own IP that you need to protect, and you have customer data that you're handling that needs to be protected. This is going to be a critical reason why you need to strengthen this area up. The other thing is from the perspective of automation, right? I like to think about automation almost like hiring an employee. You need to build a job description for your automation, including what are the skills and competencies that you want, what are the metrics that you want to measure this by, and most importantly, what is the future capability that you want this automation to have. Again, this is not just shop floor automation, but also the process automation that you're looking for. Another reason why all of us need to think about automation is that manual touch points and dependencies also create a lot of disruption when we have change in our workforce, as well as we don't find the right people for the job. So by creating certain amount of automation within your organization, you can actually de-risk these areas. We had ABB come and talk about 3 to 4 months ago at CAMS. And one of my learnings from that conversation was that robot automation at fifth shop floor level is no longer as fixed as it need to be, and it used to be rather. You can now think about robot automations from the perspective of today, I need you to load and unload this machine. In the future, I may actually need you to handle a cell. I also need this robot automation to have capabilities, to have different end effectors so that you can do loading, unloading, but also do maybe inline inspection, maybe assembly operation. So this is how you need to be thinking about your automation RFP as a capability that can grow along with your business. And the last aspect from an infrastructure perspective is your data strategy. As I mentioned earlier, if you're a domain expert, you probably have this expertise and you have blinders to the other areas that you can complementarily influence. So that gap in data is the one which you need visibility for as a business owner, as a leadership team. The second aspect from a data strategy perspective is your customers' expectations. If you take the aerospace industry, for example, I see coming down the pipeline already a huge amount of traceability data being available for the parts you're supplying to that industry, which means that they may come down to saying that, tell me about where this raw material was sourced from, what operations were conducted, what are the areas of what are the quality metrics that you measure, surface treatment, how did it impact? And all of this is this digital cube of information that needs to go along with each part. This is in addition to the expectation for the customer to know what is your capacity, whether you can take on additional orders, etc. And from your supply chain perspective, you have expectations from your suppliers, and your suppliers have expectations to know what your forecast is, what your needs are, what variability do you need in your parts, etc. Finally, going back, I have three examples, but I'm going to only pick one in the interest of time, and that is the top example, which is around CNC investment. The ABC manufacturing company, your owner knows that orders are slipping, but the report that he's getting from his shop floor team is that 90% of their capacity is booked. There is no further room. The recommendation that they're making is that, oh, let's add on a machine. You, having done the the SIRI assessment, know that there is blind spots in your data. An experiment maybe in the next 30 to 60 days to look at what is the idle time on the machines. Are you having inefficiencies in terms of the material delivery, operator scheduling, the work scheduling itself? Can give you the idea as to whether you should be investing in a machine or better integration of processes. And since ABC Manufacturing has gone through this assessment, we already know that vertical integration within the company is going to be an essential part of their transformation. With that in mind, last slide, an assessment takes only 2 days, but it is an asset that can bring a huge amount of value to a small manufacturer. If you are a buyer of a business, it gives you a manufacturing risk profile for the acquisition as to what are the areas in which you should be focusing on once you have acquired. If you are a seller, then it gives you a gap report to understand and address the areas and increase the enterprise value. So there is a monetary benefit to it as well. And if you're an investor in a business, that capability profile allows you to see how your capital can be used by the business and what the returns are going to be. So with that, I'm concluding this conversation, and I hope that you have questions for me.
Arthi, this is fascinating stuff. Thanks again for diving so deep and giving us a glimpse into the SIRI assessment. I really like how you pointed out, I think you said owners working in the business rather than working on the business earlier. Could you unpack that a bit more and talk a bit about how this assessment and this framework could be used? Because I don't think that is, I think it's not uncommon for small manufacturers to have that issue, right? That symptom. So
Yeah.
how could this be used to free up that capacity for ownership?
So this is the typical nature of a small business, small manufacturing, and small business everywhere, which is that owners take a lot more interest in solving the everyday problem within their business. And when we talk about in versus on the business, it's more about what are some of the areas in which you can actually adopt good processes and perhaps put the right systems in place for you to be able to scale the business. Let me pick an example from my life when we actually implemented the dreaded CRM and desk system. I had a conversation with somebody and they were not happy with CRM. But for us, CRM proved to be very useful, right? So when we started using the CRM system to really see how customers were using our products, what kind of interactions were they having with our people, with our service people, what kind of requirements were they having about the product that we were supplying, what we did was that we were able to address a couple of things. One was we were able to find opportunities where we could offer certain services as a subscription to our customers. What we did was we productized what we had as maybe one-on-one interaction as a service interaction. We created that as a digital asset, and we were able to monetize that as a subscription. Another thing that we actually did was, especially during COVID, what happened was that I said that we present in 30 different countries, right? So we were still shipping products to these different countries, but we were not able to send our service technicians over. So we had to figure out how to support these products, including installation for these products, without having to send our people over. We digitized a number of our installation procedures, our troubleshooting procedures, and enabled the local distributors and customers to be able to handle them. Now, what came out of that was a support system for our customers, which actually made them use our products much more effectively. It also freed up our service people. So instead of them having to travel multiple places, they were now able to look at what are the different ways in which we could actually provide assets and create services that could be done online and create a whole new stream of revenue for the organization itself. So those are a couple of examples in which using this digitization technology and using the data analysis allowed us to capture revenue.
Siri, this is so great. And I had a couple of questions for you and other people.
Sure.
Of course, I don't want to, if other people have questions, I want them to jump in as well. But you mentioned towards the very end that an owner might have to consider whether they need to make a process improvement or a technology improvement.
Yes.
And I was visiting a manufacturer. We were discussing process improvement, and he said, my practice of process improvement right now is technology improvement, because he's finding he can increase productivity or lower cost by upgrading to better technology. And I just wondered if you had a guideline for us on when should we be thinking of process improvement or when should we be thinking technology improvement?
So the way I see it, right? So when you go in with new technology, sometimes the old process is not going to stick around, right? It's you have to change your process also. So it is a bit of this. So you cannot have a situation where you have the same process and you go back to your technologist and say that I want my process to work exactly the same with the way it is using the new technology. You got to make certain adjustments. And I'm going to flip to robotics for a moment over here, right? It's a great example of a technology being adopted in order to improve process, especially shop floor process. You take a robot and you have this ability to now automate how your machine is operated. Now, what that does is that it is going to change your process also. The operator's role now is going to shift from one where they're constantly monitoring the machine to now monitoring more of the cell, making sure that product is available to the robot when it needs it so that it can continually operate. Which means that your process timelines may change, your process flow of how that material come from the store to your work cell will change. So you got to think about if your stores process is one where you are distributing material, say only once a day, you now have to think about what kind of material are you going to be dispensing from your stores so that's available for robotics throughout the day. And this person can go on to do better things as well. He can monitor multiple cells. So the role of this person has changed.
Oh, very good. Does somebody have a question before I jump into my second question? Didn't want to steal the whole time.
I was having a question. I was really intrigued by the buying and selling component. One of the things that I'm interested in is, and have been interested in for years, is what it is that private equity and other business buyers are looking for when they assess and do the due diligence before buying. And I found that IT infrastructure is one of the top things. And so I was curious, when you're doing your research on manufacturing, what are the top issues that are looking for? And I'm thinking about customer base, manufacturing assets, data assets, automation, IT team, cybersecurity, all those things. Are those high level components, or is there something else I should be thinking about?
In the manufacturing sector, especially with the smaller companies, the biggest risk factor is actually owner dependency, right? So if your owner is the one who is actually driving the entire process, that is a big risk. And I believe that risk is discounted 20 to 30% by the private equity firms in that transaction. The report, the SIRI assessment and the report and the guideline that we have in terms of how they can improve the gaps actually allows you to address that dependency. And how do you, especially on the process side of things, if it is people dependent, buyers like to see what has been created as a blueprint that can be followed by other people. I'm not saying that every company should be looking at full automation, but there should be a good understanding and good systems in place which allow people to see how things are being triggered down the entire manufacturing process.
That's great. I have another question, and James, thanks for jumping in there. You mentioned, and I'm very intrigued by this idea of comparing your current operations with best in class,
Yep.
and maybe the gap analysis that comes out of that. However, I don't know exactly how to get access to that type of information. So I'm guessing you do.
Yes. So that's actually part of this organization, the International Center for Industrial Transformation. They have thousands of companies that have gone through the assessment. So that database actually allows us to create a best-in-class comparison. And you'll see that there's a four-quadrant system, which I haven't shared with you today, but there's a four-quadrant system which allows them to see what level of automation affects which industry. And this factor of the cost profile, the KPIs, the manufacturing process itself actually determines how the different companies fall in the different profiles. So you'll find that something like the semiconductor will have a high degree of facilities automation because of clean room environment. And when you're going into something which is high volume, low mix business, like in terms of certain components, you're going to see a high level of, say, shop floor automation and better inventory management processes, etc. So you're going to see a variety depending on the industry. But the commonality that we found using this framework, the SIRI framework, is that there are these 16 dimensions which actually allows you to see what is important for your industry and your company.
If a company identifies their best in class and I always like to think that companies should operate towards the top quartile of the best in class, and that should be an aim. However, like you mentioned, these 16 dimensions, how are they, or how should they prioritize? Here's my 8 pillars, here's my 16 dimensions. And when I look at the gap, I say, wow, there's so many gaps there. Do you have a system or a thought process for prioritizing improvements?
Yes, so the exercise that we do through the SIRI assessment actually allows us to prioritize. So there's a scoring mechanism, right? So there is a complex methodology and mathematics which actually goes down the path of scoring these 16 dimensions. And once you have those 16 dimensions, and you have this cost profile as well as the KPIs that the company should be thinking about. And sometimes we actually find that the KPIs and where the dimensions are pointing just don't match. And then it becomes a conversation with management saying that you need to adjust your KPIs because this is what your company is coming out in an assessment, whereas your expectations are completely different. So this last example that we looked at, like the CNC investment, for example, that investment probably would be from a shop floor automation perspective for this particular company, ABC Manufacturing. But if they did that exercise of the 30 to 60 days, they actually would find that it's not necessarily a machine capacity problem, but a process flow issue. And that's what they need to address. Perhaps, and I have observed this, right? So I have observed this in my own factories, was that I would get an order from a customer, but it would sit perhaps in the sales inbox waiting for it to actually be triggered for a review by manufacturing for 5 days. And then afterwards, it takes their own sweet time to go through the product, your MRP planning, scheduling, etc. So all of that adds up time, and you know that it is a process issue. It is because that I am dependent on that one sales coordinator to trigger the action, but he or she was absent for a week for whatever reason, and then something just stayed. And if I'm a small business, I probably have 10 different fires that I'm trying to put out also.
Yeah.
So this probably didn't come into the mind of the owner. But the examples that we're talking about, I have so many more examples that I can tell you. They're so common, right? This is not something which is happening in isolation. It's not just the machine tool industry or parts manufacturing industry. It's happening everywhere. And the idea is that how do you build a community? That's where CAMS comes in. That's where Impact Washington comes in. That's where the players that we have in this particular meeting, as well as with part of CAMS, who can act as that common meeting of minds to be able to say what can be done.
We have just a few minutes remaining, Arthi. This is really powerful stuff. And I guess in the last couple of minutes, if you could give some advice to those on the call here, or those going to be watching the recording, to just how to get started with this powerful assessment tool, what
Right.
advice would you give?
Okay. So as I said, Smart Industry Readiness Index is an Industry 4.0 maturity assessment tool specifically designed to help companies modernize their practices as well as the technologies. So there are certified assessors all over the world, and I am one of them. And I am sharing today from my experience what can be done to help businesses go through this. As I said, the assessment itself takes only 1 to 2 days, but it can offer a powerful picture to you in terms of what are the moves that you would like to make as a business. And this is where you can also look from the perspective of Industry 4.0 is more of a journey and not necessarily a quick win that you're trying to do. Every action that you take, as I said, if you are, so Norman, you are Corso Consulting, you work so much with companies implementing ERP and MES system, and you know that implementation is going to change processes across. So understanding that any change that you make in one part of your operation actually makes changes in other parts, and how do you look at it holistically, and how that actually changes the roles and responsibilities of people within your organization is going to be key. Don't be afraid of artificial intelligence, machine learning, all those terms that are being thrown out there. A big part of it is about optimization of businesses. And we are all here to help you. We are making this journey as delightful as possible, hopefully.
That's wonderful. And you're right, it is a holistic journey. It's not just a one and done type of check the box action. With that, Arthi, thank you again for taking time to speak with the CAMS community. Folks, thank you again also for joining our first Innovation Forum for 2025. We have a lot of exciting guest speakers and topics coming up. With our next meeting, February 5th, we'll socialize the details of that meeting soon. And with that, thank you again, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day and great rest of your week.